Jesus or Muhammad. We're having an entire marathon of shows over the next several days, and we want to address some of the most important topics, which is what we always try to do here, addressing the central topics dealing with Christianity and Islam. We have the two largest religions in history, and they make claims that contradict each other, and so we want to get to the bottom of this. Which one is right, or is neither one right, or are atheists right, something like that? Well, if we want to address those kinds of issues, we have to look at the evidence, we have to look at arguments, and we have to see where the facts point. Tonight we have, of course, Sam Shamoon with us, Triple B, big, bald, beautiful.
That's right.
How you doing?
The camera has 50 pounds. I'm actually skinnier than before. Don't forget that, right?
He sure is. And we have tonight as well my friend Paul Rezculla. Paul hasn't been on here. Well, you've been on ABN before when we were discussing. If you remember, Paul is one of the people who was arrested in the city of Dearborn. Paul was standing there, not saying anything to anyone, but he was part of the group. Threw him in jail. He spent the entire night crying. Just kidding, by the way. He took it like a man. He took it like a man.
David's hand.
he took it like a man. But we're going to look at a very important topic tonight, and this is something. If you talk to Muslims, if you try to share the gospel with Muslims, you're going to be confronted with this issue over and over and over again, like a beating drum, and that's why we're going to address it. Now, Paul, you have Muslim friends?
Yes, sir.
What do you believe as a Christian?
Main tenets of the gospel.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. You could talk for an hour about what you want,
Right.
what you believe as a Christian. What would the main idea be?
Jesus claimed to be divine and was divine.
Okay.
He was
So
crucified,
deity of Christ.
right?
Okay.
Crucified and died for the sins of the world.
Jesus died on a cross
Right.
for sins. Okay.
And he rose again on that third day.
So his resurrection from the dead. And by the way, those of you who want to study Christianity, that's the core of the gospel. Jesus said all kinds of things. He taught all kinds of things. He preached sermons. But when we look to the core of the gospel, always, 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 we find death, deity, resurrection. Death, deity, resurrection. So you believe those things as a Christian. Is that what Muslims believe?
Absolutely not.
So Muslims don't believe Jesus died on the cross, don't believe he rose from the dead, don't believe he claimed to be divine. So we have a conflict here, right? And so as a Christian, you're commanded to share the gospel, and Muslims don't believe that, and so there's going to be disagreement there. So when you tell a Muslim, hey, my Muslim friend, I've got my Bible here. My Bible says Jesus claimed to be divine. He died on the cross for sins. He rose from the dead. Like clockwork, what's the response going to be?
Your book is corrupted, my friend.
Our book has been corrupted. The Bible has been corrupted. And it makes sense why a Muslim would say that. The Bible and the Qur'an disagree. They agree on certain things, don't get me wrong, and it's very important to point out when Christians and Muslims do agree on things. Christians and Muslims agree that Jesus was born of a virgin. We agree that Jesus performed miracles. We agree that Jesus is the Messiah. We agree that God exists, that God created the world. We agree on all kinds of things, so it's not like we disagree on everything. But when we get down to the core of the gospel, the core of the message that Christians want to share with others, we find Islam teaches the exact opposite on these things. And so if you're a Muslim, you believe that the gospel was originally inspired, an inspired message. You have to believe that, because this isn't, if I talk to an atheist or something like that and I tell them about Jesus, the atheist can say, I don't care about Jesus, I don't believe in him. But Muslims aren't allowed to say that. So Muslims have certain things that their religion requires them to believe, and one of the things they have to believe in, they have to believe Jesus was a messenger of God. So, Sam.
Yes, sir.
Muslims will say the gospel's been corrupted, right? You know this. We've heard this, thousands of times.
Yeah.
Now, is that the impression you would get from the Quran? Would a Muslim ever get this impression from the Quran? If a Muslim opens up his Quran, reads it from beginning to end, is he going to walk away from that thinking, wow, the book that those Christians have, that is one messed up, weird book?
I just wanted to make one comment. When you said that, what would the Muslims say about our Gospels? They said it was corrupt, huh? You said it with such passion and conviction, you convinced me. No. As a side note, if someone were to read the Quran and try to be as objective in the reading of the Quran, which is hard because every one of us approach a text with presuppositions. But if someone were just to allow the Quran to speak within its own context, the last thing that they would conclude is that the author of the Quran, or the authors of the Quran, assumed that the biblical revelation was tampered with, because you find a plethora of passages confirming the veracity, the authenticity, and the authority of the Scriptures in the possession of the Jews and Christians. Now, for the sake of time, and by the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, let me just take a look at a few of them. And by the way, I know that you've written a tract on this that's available on your blog, answeringmuslims.com. Answeringmuslims.com, David Wood wrote an excellent tract that can actually be downloaded, correct?
Yeah, it can be printed. It can print it out.
Yes, and use it in their evangelism, their witness to Muslims. So these passages are found in the tract, but let's just look at some of them. For example, chapter 3 of the Quran, verses 3 and 4. Specifically, verse 3, it says this. Now, I'm going to also comment on the Arabic, because unfortunately, many of the translators obscure what the Arabic says, because if you actually look at the Arabic, it's even more powerful. It's a more powerful witness to the veracity of the Scriptures. And in order to understand my point, let me first read the passage. Chapter 3, verse 3 says, He has sent down upon you, He is supposedly Allah, who is supposed to be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He has sent down upon you, Muhammad, the book with truth, confirming what was before it. Now that's how this particular translation renders the Arabic. Confirming what was before it. Actually, anyone who speaks Arabic can confirm the following.
Paul speaks Arabic?
Yes. Do you, by
Do
the
I?
way? No, I didn't want to put you on the spot. He put
Yes.
you on the spot. All right. The Arabic phrase is actually musaddiqan lima bayna yadayhi. Literal translation, confirming that which is between his hands.
Right.
Now that's an Arabic idiom referring to the Scriptures that Muhammad had access to. So whatever Scriptures Muhammad had access to in the 7th century, he is testifying and confirming their veracity, saying that these Scriptures are the words of God and should be trusted and believed in.
So if we go with what your average Muslim will tell us on the street, it would be something like, Jesus got a message, Jesus delivered a message to his followers, but someone like the Apostle Paul came along, corrupted the message, and then, or they'll say, you know, the Council of Nicaea. But would any of that make sense if Muhammad is saying that you guys have it between your hands?
Yeah, well,
right?
put it this way. Since we don't believe Muhammad is a prophet, it is, in theory, possible the Scriptures are corrupt.
Right.
But that would only prove that he's a false prophet.
They shouldn't believe that. Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
If the Scriptures historically can be proven to have been corrupted, then this is even further proof that Muhammad is a false prophet, because he thought otherwise. In other words, if you're a Muslim, you must adopt Muhammad's position concerning the Scriptures. His position is the Scriptures of the Jews and Christians are the uncorrupt revelations of God. Now, if history testifies that they've been corrupted, that's even more proof he's a false prophet. However, if he's correct, and Muslims have to believe he's correct, he still turns out to be a false prophet, because in bearing witness to the veracity of the Bible, which is the only Scriptures the Jews and Christians had at that time, the Bible ends up contradicting the message of the Quran concerning the nature of God, the person of Christ, and his work. So either way, Muhammad turns out to be a false prophet.
But you're not basing that all on one little passage
Oh,
from
no,
Surah
there's
3, right?
Oh, there's plenty of passages. In fact, let me just finish this passage to see what Scripture Muhammad had in mind, because it goes on to say, and he, the same divine source that sent down the Quran, sent down, it says in the same verse, chapter 3, verse 3, the Torah and the Gospel. So if anyone was confused about what Scriptures Muhammad had in mind, here it says, the Scriptures that Muhammad had in mind are the Torah, which is actually the Hebrew word for the law given to Moses. If you ask any Jewish authority on the Old Testament, what is the law of Moses? And in Hebrew, it's Torah, meaning instructions. The Torah of Moses and the Gospel. What Gospel? The Gospel given to Jesus. So these are the Scriptures that Muhammad confirms to be the uncorrupt words of God. Now, for the sake of time, let me look at a few others. There are plenty more passages that we can delve into, but again, for the sake of time, in order not to take most of the time just talking about these passages, I'll give you a few more. Chapter 6, verse 115 says this. Chapter 6, verse 115, and it's actually reiterated in chapter 18, verse 27 of the Quran. Let me give the verses again. Chapter 6, verse 115, and chapter 18, verse 27 says the following. Perfect are the words of your Lord in truthfulness and justice. Perfect are the words of your Lord. No man can change his words. He is the all-hearing, the all-knowing. Ask the Muslim that you're witnessing to, was the Torah the word of Allah? Say yes. Was the Gospel the word of Allah? Yes. Is the Quran the word of Allah? Yes. Well, according to this passage, no one can change the words, plural, of Allah. Cannot be changed. So, just a matter of logic. If the words of Allah can't be changed, and the Torah and the Gospel, as well as the Psalms, the Quran mentions the Psalms given to David, they are the words of Allah, then the conclusion is that the Torah and the Gospel and the Psalms cannot be corrupted, have not been changed. If they've been changed, and that means the Quran is mistaken, because it says no one can change the words of Allah, but you're telling me His words have been changed, because the Torah, the Gospel, and the Psalms, which were the words of Allah, have been corrupted.
So Muslims are saying Allah's word has been changed and corrupted. We open up the Quran and it says no one can change Allah's word. So Muslims are contradicting their own book.
In fact, and just to solidify what you just said and what I said earlier, Muslim scholars themselves appeal to chapter 6, verse 115 and 1827 to prove the incorruptibility of the Quran. Their logic goes like this. The Quran is the word of Allah. None can change the words of Allah, therefore the Quran can never be changed. But then I tell Muslims, be consistent. In fact, some Muslims historically were consistent and applied it to the other scriptures. Right? For example, some Muslims applied the words of chapter 6, verse 115 to the Torah to prove that the Torah given to Moses has never been corrupted, because this passage says none of the words can be changed, and the Torah is the words of Allah, therefore it could never have been changed. So they saw that. But now here's the dilemma again. Now again, I don't want to bring up the quote-unquote Islamic dilemma, but here's the dilemma for the Muslims. If the Quran is right, no one can change the words of Allah, and that includes the Torah, the Gospel, and the Psalms, then that means what I have in my possession, the Holy Bible, must be the uncorrupt revelations of God. If that's the case, then the Quran is false, because the Quran contradicts the testimony of the scriptures in my possession.